Hello everyone and welcome to Cook With Me. Tonight I'm very excited to be making our very first dessert together as per special request. Many of you voted on our poll online, so thank you very much for interacting on that one. And the hands down winner was definitely that you guys wanted some raw desserts. So hence we have a slightly later start time just so that you had time to eat some dinner first and then we can get into some dessert time. That being said, this dessert is definitely tastier after it's sat for a little while in either the fridge or the freezer, but you can always have a sneaky little slice before that happens. Okay, so give me a little wave. Let me know if you're online, if everything's all good, where you're watching from. That would be wonderful to hello from everyone. And then the other little bonus that we're going to be doing after the cranberry bounty bars, I'm also going to take you through my turmeric latte mix, which can be made up as a paste. You can store it in the fridge, and then you can go in for a quick little turmeric latte at home whenever you have the urge. So it's quite a nice little thing, especially in winter. Turmeric is an excellent booster for the immune system and so many other things for anti-inflammatory reasons. I think people are at a loss at how beneficial turmeric can actually be in the body. So this is one way to get a bit of a super dose in. Turmeric's also really high in iron, by the way, if you saw my latest blog post. Okay, so welcome Veggie Nanny, welcome Kate. Who else have we got? Let's let me know. Angela, welcome. And so just let me know who's in the kitchen with you tonight. I want to know who's cooking. This recipe is definitely friendly for kids. So if they're around and they're even half keen, let's get them in on this one because it'll be a bit more rewarding that they get to come and cook in the kitchen and also again end up with dessert. Okay, so without further delay, let's get into it. I'm also going to be covering some interesting things about how to calculate the sugar contents in whatever you're making. And I'm going to show you how to do that tonight with the cranberry bounty bars, and we'll talk about a couple other things on the way. So if you haven't already got everything out, please grab everything out now, the ingredients wise. And as far as the size of the container that I'll get you to use, you could go approximately this size. Unless you like a really thin bar, then go a bit bigger. Otherwise, you can use individual containers, but it does take a lot more work to spread it out individually. So definitely you'd want to employ the kids' help on that one. So I'm going to be using this size of a container tonight. And I've just put a layer of baking paper in so that once we compact the layer in and we chill it, then we can lift the whole thing out for easier cutting. It's not necessary, but it's just a little step that will make it easier for you to take it out once it's all set. All right, so let's leave that there. And come on over, let's get us set up here for the cranberry bounty bars. One thing I'll say, you will need a food processor. Obviously it doesn't have to be a Thermomix, but a food processor, preferably a strong one. Now the only way that raw desserts will ever let you down, generally, is if the machine that you're using is not quite powerful enough. So that will be indicated by too much chunkiness, if you will, in the texture, which could be perfectly wonderful for you. You might love that extra bit of texture that you get out of a raw dessert when it's a little bit chunky, but you may not have ever experienced it before if you've not made it at home. Because in the cafes, they're all using the most high power blenders to get everything super smooth. So that's just one little differentiator. It will make a noticeable difference, but like I said, if you've not known any different, then it's all good and it'll be fine. Now, bear with me, I just need to get the jug for the Thermomix, and I'll be right back so you guys can get yourself all organized. Okay. Now, 4 cups of coconut. It's a lot of coconut, but it's the main ingredient in the dish, as you can see. And the interesting thing is that we can make this dish, or it is nut-free. So it's safe to go to schools, especially if they're really strict about the nut allergies. Coconut is not considered a nut by that definition, so that's all good there. Just make sure everyone's all with us here at the same time. And let me know if you guys have any questions along the way, because I know that we're doing something slightly different here with a raw dessert. What I would like to show you are some of the concepts that apply to pretty much any raw dessert. And they're similar in the sense where they generally just involve either a food processor or a blender. They involve layers, generally speaking compacted into some type of withholding container. And then however decorative we get with those layers is completely up to you. And the flavors that we bring out in each of those layers is also completely up to you. But that's kind of the essence of how to build any raw dessert. So no different when we're making a Bounty bar. Okay, so straight into the food processor. Let's just get right into this so we have time to make a turmeric latte together. So 4 cups of desiccated coconut. If you've only got coconut flakes, that's okay, but you'll need to put more in because we need that volume of the coconut. What I am going to do is I'm going to get a measurement on the weight of this so that we can calculate the total amount of sugar in this recipe. All right, so that's half a cup. So bear with me while I count. I don't want to lead you guys astray. 2. If the kids are involved, this is a good thing for them to help with. 3. I'm using a half cup, so I need to put in 8 to get my 4 cups. Can any of you kids do math? I think I already lost my count. That was 5. These are fractions. 6. Oh, we're going to be just 7 and 8. There we go. And notice I'm not being super strict about it. When it comes to the raw dessert, it's not like a baked dessert where we need to be more particular about getting exact amounts. So that was lucky that we had just enough there. All right, who's got questions? Okay. Veggie Nanny, can I use maple syrup for the sweetening? Yes, that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. We are going to address the different types of sugars and sweeteners. Definitely you can use maple syrup. Maple syrup, honey, and rice syrup, rice bran syrup, also known as rice malt syrup, are going to be fairly interchangeable in any dish. The only thing you'll need to understand is the difference in sweetness levels. So the rice syrup is going to be the least sweet out of those 3 options. Honey is going to be the most sweet in taste, and maple is going to be just slightly less than honey. So those will have a very different effect on the dish, even if we're only using 4 tablespoons, just to keep in mind. So if you do use the maple syrup or the honey, I would recommend probably toning it back just a little bit, unless you're a sweet tooth and you want to have that extra little kick. All right, so we've got 325 grams of coconut in that one, and yours may vary a little bit. I'm going to do this fancy little sheet here to show you how to calculate the sugar content in the dish. Now, I'm just going to write these notes and I'll show you here at the end. So coconut, we're going to put down 325 grams and do our calculations at the end. All right, next up, how's everyone going? I also would like to know if everyone's proficient at raw desserts already, if you've experimented with different kinds. Just let me know where you're at with the whole raw dessert thing because it'll help me know where I can take you next. All right, 4 tablespoons of golden flax meal. Now, by now, those of you that have done a few of these things with me already, maybe you know why I snuck that flax meal in there. Little extra boost of omega-3s and definitely a bit of extra fiber. Flax meal is one of what I call my 4 magic brooms. And the 4 magic brooms are what helps clear the intestine and make sure that you have not just a bowel movement, but a complete bowel movement. As in, not to get into detail tonight, but we don't want any caking. We want everything to come out clean, tidy, and the house is tidy on the inside. And flax meal is one of the things that helps with that. So I know we're having dessert, but I just had to sneak in the 4 tablespoons of flax meal. And also it does have a little effect of helping hold that layer together because coconut's quite crumbly. So unless we were to use a lot of coconut oil, which would act as a saturated fat to hold the layer together when cold, I'm going to use some flax meal for like a triple benefit, basically, on that one. And it does provide kind of a nice little bit of nuttiness as well to it. All right, 4 tablespoons of the rice bran syrup. Now, I am going to go into a little bit more detail in the rice bran syrup because I have slightly mixed feelings about this syrup. But bear with me while I do this. I'm going to get a more accurate weight on this one. So I'm going to go for my little fine-tuned scale here. And I just want to make sure I get you guys an accurate calc on the sugar. So 4 tablespoons is the equivalent of 1/4 cup. So we'll just tare that one. Maybe you guys can put in your guesses as to how many grams of sugar you think are going to be in the whole dish once we're done. So let's just get our 4 tablespoons worth of rice bran syrup. So rice bran syrup is highly processed, and therefore it's not one of my favorite ingredients. However, Oh, I didn't get the weight on that one. Paying attention, Ashley, here. Okay, 90 grams. So 90 grams of rice bran syrup. Got to write that one down before I forget. So yes, so the reason why I'm using rice bran syrup, you may have seen it popularized by other recipe writers and other cooks. Provided you get an organic rice bran syrup and you understand what it is, then you can make, I believe, an educated decision on whether you want to use this or you want to use something different. Now, like I said before, it is highly processed. That syrup came from rice originally. So you can imagine what it would have had to have gone through to get to that. The process is not heavily chemical based, unless there is a potential of that if it's not a certified organic rice malt syrup. But for the most part, they add an enzyme, and that eventually breaks down the sugars in the rice so that they can extract it. And after a fair amount of filtering and a fair amount of other processing, we end up with a sweetish syrup. Now, the only thing a couple of things to note. One is that it's nearly 100% glucose. So there's no fructose in it. And most people nowadays, most of the research is pointing towards fructose being the dangerous sugar or the dangerous sweetener. And glucose is not seen to be as dangerous because it can be absorbed and metabolized by every single cell in our body. Whereas fructose needs the liver to be converted. And once it's in the liver, it gets converted into fat. So some of you may have heard the term TOFI, T-O-F-I. It stands for thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And a lot of people did I say that right? Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. I might have messed that one up. TOFI, T-O-F-I. Basically what it means is that you might look thin and you might look healthy, but if you're eating a lot of fructose or a lot of things that are causing that to happen on the inside, you could be having a lot of visceral fat around the organs on the inside, which could eventually lead to fatty liver disease and a whole host of other problems. So that's why the whole fructose is seen as the major issue right now. So with rice bran syrup being predominantly glucose, or pretty much entirely glucose, it's just under 100% glucose, what that does is it's an immediate blood sugar spiker in the body. So it instantly gets absorbed into the bloodstream and it spikes our blood sugar level. So obviously we'd want to reduce the amount of that effect. Like we want to reduce the amount that we eat of pure glucose or that type of sweetener because there's no buffering in the body. So as soon as our blood sugar spikes, the insulin gets released and it spikes as well. And then we get the highs and we get the crashes. And the crashes lead to hunger and lead to more cravings. And then it kind of continues this pattern amongst what's also happening on the inside of the body. So in a nutshell, the difference then between this and, say, for example, maple syrup or honey, which also have a content of fructose, is you're getting a bit of a different, I guess, balance between the two not so good elements of it. However, I guess the main thing to take away here is that the less processed of a sugar that you eat, as in a whole piece of fruit, or in this case I'm relying a lot on the dates, because a date is still something that's exactly from nature, and therefore it comes with a bunch of other fiber and other minerals and vitamins, whereas we don't get a lot of minerals and vitamins from a highly processed sugar. So in that sense, it's nature's kind of perfect food when it's in its whole food form, as in a date, an apple, a banana. Using fruit wherever possible to sweeten your dish is ideal. Now, if anyone has more questions on that, we can go into a little bit more detail. I'm just going to write down my 90 grams of rice bran syrup, and then we can move on. All right, and forgive me, I've got sticky fingers. 1 second. There we go. All right, so beyond that, and next up, we've got our coconut cream, 3/4 of a cup, and a pinch of salt. Now, I like to always have cans of coconut cream in stock. It's one of my favorite things to have available for, well, either warm drinks or raw desserts or whatever else I so feel. So that's a 1/2 cup, and there goes 3/4 of a cup. And a pinch of salt. It's interesting, you may not think the pinch of salt is necessary, but it does make a difference in the dish. It will bring out that little bit of flavor, even though it's not meant to taste salty. It will still enhance the flavors that are there. So don't skip that little one. Now, all we have to do is blend this up. Hopefully your machine's up for the task. And forgive the noise. So that was about 20 seconds on speed 8 if you are using a Thermomix. There. Okay, so if you missed what I just said there, what I'd like to say is I don't want you relying on the numbers, for example, in the Thermomix. Once you have a feel for it, I want you to just go by feel so that you know ultimately what the dish is supposed to look like, rather than just doing exactly what the numbers say, and if it doesn't work, the recipe sucks. So not often will I give you the actual numbers for the Thermomix, but I want you to know what we're looking for. So see how that's quite sticky? And you can see if we were to pack that down, it would stay nice and firm. That's basically what we're looking for. So it's quite nice and sticky down there, okay? That's exactly the texture. So let's pour that into whatever base you've chosen, whatever dish, or your individual fancy dishes. Definitely if I'm going to a special party or something, I'll spend a little bit more time to make this into, I guess, prettier presentation. But if it's the sake of getting your freezer full so that there's those somewhat naughty, somewhat nice snacks on hand whenever anyone gets the snackies, then this is probably the easiest, fastest way to go, is one big slice. So just doing your best in getting everything that you can out of the food processor. We don't need to clean it from here though, because it's all going to go into the same dish anyways. At this point I like to use a soft spatula just to get the last little bit out there. And again, unlike regular cooking shows that probably leave an entire piece of the dish's worth of coconut in here and just chuck it to the side, we're going to take an extra second and make sure we get all that out. All right, so now the fun bit. This is where it's really great to get the kids along, because you can start on the next layer while you get them doing this. Probably the back of a big spoon is the easiest way to compact this. Once you get it somewhat evenly packed, then it'll be easier to spread or to run the spoon over. So we just want to get kind of the base down. If it's really sticking to the spoon, the other trick you can do is get a little bit of your coconut oil and just rub the back of the spoon in the coconut oil. It would be ideal if it was liquid, and then we'll just press that through. Okay, let's keep it on that side of the paper. So this part, you can get as picky or pedantic as you like about it. Generally speaking, because this is the bottom layer, it's not super critical, but keep in mind when you do cut into these squares and you look at it from the side, you'll get to see whether or not your layer was flat or not. So if that matters to you, you may want to spend a little bit more time flattening, or again, employing the kids. All right, so like I said, once we get the base flattened down, then it makes it a little bit easier on the spoon. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to call that good. Normally I'd sit here and putz around for a little bit longer, but it's not super critical. Like I said, especially if it's just for your own snacking. And one little trick, I'll just get you to zoom in on this one. One little trick with any dish that you're going to need to be pressing down, especially the raw dessert world, is to run the spoon along the side of the dish just to even out the edges, because it's actually the edges that you'll often see, especially if you're doing individual little dishes. So just running the tip of the spoon along the edges smooths that out really nice and evenly. There we go. All right, now ideally you would pop this in the freezer before you put in the next layer. It doesn't make a huge difference. We can just freeze it at the end, so that's what I'm going to do. And like I said, don't bother cleaning the jug. It's just an extra step that you don't need to worry about. The next layer is bright red, so none of that's going to matter. Okay, now here's where it gets fun. We're going to sneak raw beetroot into your dessert and no one's going to know. It's going to feel like cranberry. Well, hopefully no one's going to know. Now, how do I get technical about the amount of beetroot? Well, it's about this much. This is already peeled, ready to go. We've got about 136 grams worth of beetroot. I believe I've said 1/2 cup of fresh beetroot. Now, this is probably going to be slightly more than 1/2 cup, so I'll let you decide whether or not you want to err on the side of caution on that one and have just the 1/2 cup. I'm going to put it all in because I love beetroot. And generally speaking, you won't taste it in the dish. Okay, now beetroot fingers. One thing I was going to do though is weigh the beetroot, because believe it or not, there's actually quite a bit of sugar. Well, not compared to rice bran syrup, but I'm going to weigh that beetroot because I want to see exactly how much sugar is in this dish. And I want to get an accurate measure here. Oh, we already weighed it. What am I doing? How much was that? 136. My bad. I'm in the moment. 136 grams. Good. Okay. Next up, cranberries. 1.5 cups of dried cranberries. Notice how nice and dark these ones are. If yours are bright red, chances are they may have used sulfites to keep it bright red. These are organic dried cranberries, and we want them to be that dark. That's a sign that they haven't used any sulfites to preserve the color. Same goes with dried apricots, and there's a couple other fruits that do that as well. But in particular, that's one way to note. The other thing is that normally the organic dried cranberries are apple juice sweetened, which has less sugar content than a traditional sweetening with regular sugar for the cranberries. So that's one little tip when you're buying them to look out for. Now, cranberries. Let's get a weight on these guys. So 1.5 cups. Try and be fairly accurate here. Whoa. Okay. Need to go for a little sneaky. There we go. Okay. 1.5 cups of cranberries is approximately 200 grams. I'll make note of that one. And I weighed the dates in advance, and they were 263 grams for the total of 14 medjool dates. That does include the pit, but we'll count that as negligible. All right, now last but not least, we need some vanilla and the dates in here. Oh, I love fresh medjool dates. If you didn't get a chance to get the fresh squishy ones, and you've got sort of more the dry, harder ones, one trick that you can do in any dish that calls for medjool, and if you only have the dried ones, is just soak them in a little bit of boiling water for about 10 minutes or so, and that will soften them up and help them to behave like a medjool date in the dish, because it can make a big difference. If a dish calls for medjool dates, as in the soft ones, and you put in the kind of dried shrivelly ones without pre-soaking them, it will definitely affect the dish. And then if you couple that with not having a strong enough food processor, you'll probably end up with something you might not like the taste of. So my point here is that little things can make a big difference in some cases. And that's what I'd like to show you as you're cooking, is where you can be really flexible and what makes a big difference. So we've got our 6 medjool dates, a little bit of vanilla. I'm going to be using powdered vanilla. Apparently vanilla is really hard to come by at the moment, so if you don't have it, that's okay. Powdered vanilla is used approximately the same ratio as the liquid vanilla. Whichever one you've got, go for it. About a teaspoon of that. They're approximately equivalent. And again, we let the machine do the work. Sorry, that was loud, I know. Lots of dried cranberries in there. Okay. Doesn't look too pretty yet, but it will turn nice and red as we get it into the dish, or it'll look pretty against the dish. Now you might want to do one scrape down here and go again with the machine if you want it to be a little bit smoother. Especially if you plan on eating this straight from the freezer, you're going to want it to be as smooth as you can get, otherwise you'll bite into kind of those hard frozen bits of cranberry. So one other tip I can give you on that is if you really want it super smooth, pre-soak your cranberries in boiling water as well in advance, and that'll soften them up and make them easier to mush down. Okay, so one more time. Sorry for the noise. I want this to be nice and smooth. And all over my eyebrows. Forgive me if I've got beetroot all over my face. Now, let's not waste that little bit on the lid either. That's another good half a slice for someone. Okay, so simple, easy. Next layer goes on, pack it down, spread it out evenly. There we go. And I'm actually going to be making version number 2 of the chocolate layer. So if you were planning on making version number 1, that's absolutely fine. All it is basically is setting yourself up a double broiler so that you don't scorch the chocolate by putting it directly over the heat. So you'll just need either a proper double boiler arrangement, or you can make yourself one, as long as you have a heat-safe glass bowl to put in the saucepan over the boiling water. Make sure it's heat-safe. We've done that by accident. I've done that and cracked a bowl. So definitely want to go the Pyrex. All right, so nice, rich, bright red, full of antioxidants. How is everyone going? All right. Any other questions? Good stuff. Okay. Now, forgive me while I just get this last bit out of here. I do want my chocolate layer to taste as chocolatey as I can instead of cranberry-y. There we go. All right, so we'll smooth that one down. This layer is a bit easier to pack down. The other thing is if we didn't do a good enough job packing down the first layer, then you'll notice that the coconut will lift as you spread this one over it. So that's just one little tip to look out for. It also helps then by putting it in the freezer in between slightly, but if you're acting really fast, then you won't have time to do anything. All right, so we'll spread that one nice and thin. I like stretching these bars as far as I can, so I use, I guess, the biggest slice container that I can make it work in, and that way I get more chocolate on the surface. And then we're going to calculate our sugar content. Now, when it comes to sugar, the reason why I wanted to calculate this for you and show you how it's done is so that you can get a better idea of any dish that you make at home, how much sugar you're actually eating, because I think many of us don't realize it. It's not often, I think, that anyone sits down to calculate how much sugar they've eaten in a day. It's probably something, though, that we should be more aware of. And for those of you that have not yet seen that sugar film, highly, 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 highly recommend you watch it. And very much so, highly recommend it. As in, we just have to be more aware of what we're putting in our bodies, and especially when we're putting in sugars that don't come with their fibers, as in processed sugars, not straight from a piece of fruit. That's when things start to get a little bit scary in the body. Okay, there's the cranberry layer. Now, I want to calculate the sugar content before we go any further so that we have a bit of an idea. I have also included the dates from the chocolate layer, and that's really the only thing that's going to be contributing any sugar to the chocolate layer, so that one is included. So all I'm going to do is, coconut has, you can watch with me here, coconut has 6% sugar. So we're just going to times it by 0.06. So 325 grams we put in times 0.06 gives us 19.5 grams of sugar from the coconut. The rice bran syrup, remember how I said it's 100% glucose, so it's basically 100% sugar. So in this case, that's 90 grams of sugar. 263 times 0.65, because the medjool dates, so we've got 171 grams. 200 times 0.06, 12 grams, and 136, that's 9.5. So if we add that up, ,302 grams of sugar in this whole dish. So now what we need to figure out is how many servings this is going to account for. Now that's going to vary dramatically depending on the person. Personally, I've said that it serves 12, but that's like a whole dessert serving. Whenever I go into the freezer to have a little nibble, it's probably, I could get at least 24 serves out of this. So if we were to cut that into 6, actually more than that, 6 by 6 would be a little square that I would get out of this. So dividing by 36 would be my serving, but I'll encourage you to look at this bar and see how many servings you would cut out of it, and then you can divide the number, basically 300 grams, divided by that number to see how much. So divided by 36 for my serving, and I'll be getting 8.4 grams of sugar in my little serving. Now, the interesting thing that I want you to really take note of is when you taste this dish, taste it for its sweetness level compared to other dishes that you eat. And if it doesn't taste sweet to you, but it's got between 8 and 10 grams of sugar for one serving, it's going to show you just how much sugar is hiding from you in seemingly innocent raw desserts or other foods. So this is kind of why I wanted to put into perspective, because generally speaking, when you taste this, it's not going to be overwhelmingly sweet, depending on your taste buds. So we had 302 grams of sugar. I have said that I'm going to get 36 servings out of that, but that's quite generous. I'd say most people would be around the sort of 24 to 30 mark. And that equals 8.4 grams of sugar per serving. All right, so that's how we calculate it. You just have to go on Google and search what percentage of sugar is in X, or how many grams, and make sure the grams is shown per 100 grams, and then you get the percentage really easily. So that's how we calculate that. It really is going to show you exactly how much sugar comes out of homemade brownies, for example. When you see how many cups have to go in to achieve that brownie taste that you get at the cafe, it's a very big eye-opener, I've found. The magic number, just to put this into perspective, that we should be eating no more of per day is 20 grams. The average for Australians anyways is 96.4 grams per day that we're consuming of sugar. So it is a big deal, and I'm not picking on it for the sake of picking on this dish. I'm using this so that you can compare the sweetness level in that to other things that you eat, and then maybe you'll get a bit of a better idea of where you're at. Okay, last layer, chocolate layer, my favorite. So we need the rest of the dates, and if you haven't already boiled the kettle, we're going to need 1/3 cup of boiling water. So we'll just turn that one on now. Thank you. And so yes, 1/3 cup of the hot water with the rest of our dates. This is going to help everything blend up smooth. Don't forget those pits. You'll hear it in the machine if you forget one. There we go. Another great little thing the kids can be doing and helping you with. Pitting the dates. And getting sticky fingers. Now the cacao. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the dish. And cacao is, dare I say, good for us in many ways. In other ways, not so much. It still does have a caffeine content. It is also high in magnesium. There is some belief that if a woman's craving chocolate, she could just be low in magnesium. I don't know if that's a convenient excuse or if it's real, but maybe someone can enlighten me. All right, so we need 1/3 cup of our hot water. Please be very careful if you're using freshly boiled water. Make sure nothing is contacting that metal, because It's going to get hot very fast. So 1/3 of a cup. Basically everything's going to go straight in like we did the other layers. And the nice thing about using the boiling water, especially in winter when your coconut oil has gone firm, is that we don't need to worry about preheating and pre-melting that coconut oil. So let's do the 3 tablespoons of coconut oil. And ideally, in this case, because we're not putting this to really high heat, this is where it's really good for you to use an extra virgin or a virgin coconut oil, because you're going to be getting more, I guess, of the good components of the saturated fat from the first press of the coconut, which is the extra virgin. If you're using cooking oil, you're just going to get marginally less of those valuable, the more delicate, unstable components of the coconut oil. So there's our 3 tablespoons of organic cold-pressed coconut oil. And then we need 1/2 cup of cacao, some vanilla, and salt. I have said a pinch of salt. If you're a salty caramel or salty chocolate lover, you can probably go up to 1/4 teaspoon, maybe a touch more, but I wouldn't go any more than that. So I'm going to go 2 big pinches because I love a little bit of extra punch. And our vanilla. It's very expensive, but very lovely treat to know that you're not getting dodgy imitation vanilla. And last but not least, our 1/2 cup of cacao powder. Now I've got all mine wet here, so I'm going to use this one. And because we're using the food processor, you don't need to worry about sifting the cacao. Some recipes it'll be required, but in this case, we're all good. Once you've made this once, you'll know how dark of a chocolate this is going to make, and then you can adjust. So if you like more of a milk chocolate, basically that means a higher sugar content, less cacao. So put less of this powder in, and that'll make up for it. If you like a darker chocolate, you could get away with a little bit more. All right, that's everything. Let's blend it up. Sorry for the noise again. Okay, and this layer, again, depending on your machine, is probably going to need a few scrape downs of the bowl and definitely the lid. As you can see, it kind of goes everywhere when we're blending up those dates. So we do want to put all that back in and continue blending. This one will be noticeable if we don't get it smooth enough. So do press this down as many times as you need to get a cohesive layer. And this is where having a good spatula is a really good organization point. Believe it or not, having a good spatula is an example of organization. Once you get yourself to organize once, as in you get one, then you're good to go forevermore until you accidentally stick it in the Thermomix and knock the bottom off of it. Don't do that. In future, I'll buy one that's a different color to the other spatula. All right. Let's see if we need one more or if we can get away with this one. If you're using a blender like a Vitamix blender or the Optimum blender that are quite the strong, powerful ones, you could possibly even get away with a NutriBullet. The only thing is it might be hard to kind of scrape down the edges. Maybe not, so I'll let you get back to me if anyone's using a NutriBullet. I'd love to hear how this layer goes in that one. Okay, I'm going to go one more time just to make sure this is nice and smooth. Labor of love, these Cranberry Bounty bars. All right, come on. Dun, dun, dun. There we go. Okay. Now, This is going to be a much thicker chocolate than the first covering layer option, version 1. So that one, if you don't overheat it, you should be able to pour that one over top of the layer. But if you need to spread it, or if you need to use version 2, then we're going to need to spread it. So just keep that in mind. If you were planning on making the actual chocolate bar looking effect, where you pre-cut them and you pour it over top, you'll need to use version 1. All right, so this one is easiest if we can kind of dollop it around the layer, and that way it's going to make our spreading job a little bit easier and less likely that we'll muck up the cranberry. Okay. Trying to get that last little bit of chocolate from around the blade because that's all the goodness. One little note I have made on the recipe is in future, if you wanted more chocolate per cranberry ratio, then you can just double the quantities, or you can just times them by 1.5 even, to give you a little bit extra chocolate layer. And then you can redo your calcs and see what we get there. Okay, here we go. I'm not going to mess around anymore. I'll probably go in and lick these blades after, or not the blades, but the bowl around the blades. Do we have any kids in the kitchen tonight? I'd like to hear about that. If so, please give me a hello and let me know who's cooking in the kitchen. All right, last layer. Here we go. Then this is going to go straight into the freezer. Hopefully you can leave it in the freezer long enough to solidify before you absolutely have to dig in. Might be a late night for some of you. I might even just have some for breakfast. I didn't just say that, sorry. Kids, you didn't hear that, cover your ears. All right, there's our chocolate layer. Simple, nice and easy. We can get decorative. You could add some sprinkles of toasted coconut flakes on top. That would be amazing. You could add other cranberries on top. You can even add fresh fruit. Just because it's a cranberry bounty bar doesn't mean you can't add fresh strawberries or whatever you've got on hand. This dish would even be amazingly colorful if you had some pink dragon fruit. I don't think they're in season at the moment here, but that would be amazing as well. Okay, there we have it. Into the freezer it goes. And then we can make some turmeric lattes together. So if you are going to break from here and not going to join us for the turmeric lattes, thank you so much for coming to cook with me. Cranberry bounty bars. I would love to see how yours have gone and maybe how quickly they've gone down. But now that I did that sugar thing for you, you're probably going to be really careful about it and cut them into 6 by 6. Maybe not. Thank you. We'll see you next time on Cook With Me.